Hello everyone, so let's look at the tips for this week. Okay, so first tip I want to go through is if your sketchfab uploader 4 doesn't work on your Zbrush to upload your models into sketchfab, okay, you can delete the folders. Don't contain any folder on your Zbrush, and then you'll be able to upload easier, and renaming the files might work as well. Okay, ZappLink projection from notes from last week. Okay, so if you still don't really understand how to do, please follow through the notes step by step, and then make sure you close your documents when you do that, and then press accept after you re-enter the mask, and then you should be able to follow through pretty easily. Alright, so another tip for this week, okay, I want to teach you guys about replay last relative, which is also shift 1 plus 1 on the viewport without moving or rotating your camera. So what does it do? You can create one brush stroke and then you can repeat it following the camera. So it's like doing a projection on the camera. Okay, so I'll show you this very quickly. So if I were to open up a dock, okay, add a few dynamic mesh, subdivision levels. So just on this view itself, I'll just use number 1 brush to create one brush stroke. Okay, if I press shift 1 now on any of these different areas, it will just repeat the brush stroke, shift 1. Okay, so this is pretty useful if you want to repeat a similar brush stroke a lot of times. If I were to do this on using my number 8 brush, okay, let me just use my number 8 brush. I can choose one of these alpha, so I can drag out an alpha. Hold on, why isn't my alpha coming out? Let's try another one. See, yeah, it's not on. Okay. Okay, so now I'm on this view, right? And then I'm just gonna do that again. Press shift 1. So don't rotate your camera, and then you'll be able to keep repeating the same brush stroke. And then you can keep repeating the same pattern. So you can see that ZBrush is actually very good at repeating a texture or pattern through a camera projection. So that is also the same when you're using surface noise. So I think that's just something good to keep in mind. And camera projection mapping uh, works well. Works well for this camera, and then you can go to another camera and start looking. But if you were to do from another camera angle, when you press shift 1, now it would not look the same anymore, because you need to do the same scale again if you want to change the angle. So you need to redo that, get the right scale, and you press shift 1 again. So it may take a while to get used to, but it's good to keep in mind you have this function going on. So replay last relative, pretty cool. Okay, tip number 9 I'll go through on another video. Tip 20, remember brush draw size for draw pass, very useful. So for example, if we are using Opcrack, okay, so Opcrack we normally always want it to be small, and SnakeHook we normally always want it to be big, and then Create View Art we want it to be kind of normal brush size. So with this tree it's all kind of different, but if we change the draw size it will kind of change. We always need to kind of go back and forth, which is kind of what I did over the years. I've been used to that already, but if you want to use a easier method, it is just toggle on remember draw size per brush button, so it's pretty cool. So let's say if I do on this side my number 6 brush, I go and on remember draw size, so the number 6 brush draw size will be small, number 4 brush the draw size will be big, and number 1 brush number 1 brush the brush size will be kind of average. Okay, so if I change between 1, 4 and 6, Create View Up or Crack SnakeHook, it will change the size accordingly. So it didn't used to do that. So, but if you just toggle this on, it will remember the brush size for you. So yeah, that's pretty handy for us. So you should try to take note and remember this. Next, I want to talk about remember dynamic mode per draw brush. Okay, so what does it do? Remember dynamic mode for draw brush. If you toggle this on, it will affect the dynamic, which is this very small button. So for example, if you start to do off dynamic on your SnakeHook brush to make it go bigger, I've talked about this before, which is when you want to let's say if you have a very big dog, okay, and then you use your SnakeHook brush, and then my SnakeHook draw size of 1000, I can only affect this area. I cannot go any bigger. So I restricted by the size here. So but if I double click on dynamic draw size, now you can magically realize that my SnakeHook brush can go infinitely big, and that's because my brush size is not being restricted to the model size anymore, or the viewport size, the camera size. So it just gives me a lot more control. So with SnakeHook, there is a tendency that you may off dynamic draw size, but with number 8 brush is this one. So let's say if I were to draw dots like this, and I change this up to I'll change this stroke to drag dot. Sorry, I can't do a screen stop to show you, but I can mouse over like this. So drag dot. So if I just use a drag dot, so what this does is that it will always create the size of 108 draw size when I'm using drag dot. So instead of drag rectangle, now I'm using drag dot, and it will give me constantly a draw size of 108 because that's my draw size right now. Okay, but if I zoom out, my draw size is still the same. So if I zoom out, my draw size is still the same. So it's pretty cool, right? So that is because my dynamic draw size is on. Sorry, yeah, correct. So default dynamic draw size is on. So no matter how I zoom in or out, the brush is relative. So actually ZBrush is doing that by default, so that, and I guess if you see this example, it makes more sense, right? If you zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, and you make this dot, it should always be the same size. But if I make it off, now my draw size is different. So if I zoom in and zoom out, the draw size will be different. So it's no longer being tied to how it's being used over here. So just to keep that in mind, if you want to use a drag rectangle number 8 brush and then change it to drag dot and use on dynamic, the alpha will affect your the way you use a dynamic draw size. And then if you use number 4 drag rectangle, if you want to off dynamic, you can do so. So by having this button on, you will remember to on dynamic on this draw size, and then when I change back to number 4, it knows that I off this on purpose. Now it will kind of remember this. So it will remember my setting of what I done on dynamic here. So you remember that number 4 brush, I like it to be off. Number 2 brush, number 3 brush, the rest of the brush is all on, except for my number 4 brush, which is a SnakeHook brush. I have it off, and then the rest will still be kept on, which is kind of handy. So maybe just keep both of this on if you are still not very clear about what I'm talking about. That maybe one day you'll be clearer when you revisit this video. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about is later this week I'll teach you how to model this character following the Animax tutorial to model a stylized animation character head. So just want to take note, don't rotate your eye for no reason, for any particular reason as well. Whatever you do, just keep it facing the front. It's kind of important, so that our eyes, the pupil, will always have this. We'll be able to set this specular highlight correctly. So specular highlight will work correctly if the eye is works correctly. If the eye is facing the front and not rotated inward. So in this case, this eye is actually rotating inwards. So I purposely rotate it the wrong way, so that the specular highlight will form on the wrong side of the eye, and you can see that you will have a problem with creating the eye later. So if you did that, you may need to recreate the eye again, which is just a sphere, not too much, but just keep that in mind. ZBrush likes it if you keep the eye pointing to the center, to the front, and then just don't rotate the eye inward or outward for any reason. So if you rotate it outward, you go this direction. All right, so I think that's all for the tips this week. For more details on this, I think when you go through the videos this week, you will understand what I'm talking about. And yeah, I'll see you on the next few videos. Bye bye.